I'm Madeleine Mitchell. I've been a violinist throughout my career, but I've had a lifelong passion for art as well as music, and it seems to me that they really complement each other. In 1997, I founded the eclectic international festival, the Red Violin, with Yehudi Menuhin as founder patron, and the title was taken from Le Violon Rouge paintings by Dufy Pugny and others. And it was wonderful to celebrate the violin right across the arts. Creating a film gives the possibility of combining musical performance with art in an imaginative way. This whole idea stemmed from a meeting at the Victoria and Albert Museum to discuss the possibility of my London Chamber Ensemble doing some concerts, and I was interested to hear about the forthcoming exhibitions, and the Fabergé Romance to Revolution sparked my interest the most, and I thought, oh, it would be wonderful to have a concert of Russian romantic chamber music to go with the exhibition. I was delighted when the Royal Philharmonic Society gave me an Enterprise Award in order to make this film possible. I was lucky to be asked to perform in the St. Petersburg Festival of British Music. I gave a recital at the Samoylov Museum, which was like a salon, and I presented pieces by Stanford, Howells, Frank Bridge, all Royal College of Music composers, alongside Delius, and a piece written for me by James Macmillan. I also performed the Lark Ascending by Vaughan Williams in the marvellous Glazunov and Rimsky-Korsakov halls in St. Petersburg, so I've already got the feeling of being there. In my research for the music for this concert, I was fascinated to discover Les Vendredis, and here we are on a Friday night, so it's perfect. This was initially a series of performances informally at the mansion of the lumber millionaire Mitronov Belayev, and he was a viola player. And when he was 50, he decided to devote his life to furthering Russian music, and he founded a publishing firm in 1885. That's exactly the same year that Fabergé began the creation of the imperial eggs for the Tsars. So if you can imagine, on a Friday night, these four musicians would get together and they would perform Mozart and Mendelssohn, but then they would have the latest pieces by Russian composers, Rimsky-Korsakov, Glazunov, Lyudov and Borodin. And sometimes they would be hot off the press, the ink just dry. Belayev published these pieces in 2 volumes, cahiers they were known as, of short pieces. And we're going to play the Mazurka and the Saraband by Anatoly Lyudov. Then there was another interesting collaboration between 3 of these composers, Glazunov, Lyudov and Rimsky-Korsakov, for a work for the jour de fête, or the name day, for Belyaev. And we're going to play the last movement, which is the Chœur dansé russe, or the Khorovod. The name Fabergé is inextricably linked with luxury and superb craftsmanship, as coveted today as it was when it was first made. And Fabergé is associated very much with royalty. It was interesting that at the Royal College of Music, Prince of Wales, Edward, opened the college, and he became one of the main patrons of Fabergé in London. And his wife was the sister of the Empress of Russia. So the 2 families were very much linked, and it was the Russians who influenced the British royal family very much. Peter Carl Faberge was born in 1846 and worked for his father, quickly finding success and then taking over the firm. In 1885, he was granted the prestigious official supplier to the imperial court, and 5 years later he was granted access to all the palaces. The British royal family were a major commissioner of animals from Faberge that were on their favourite Sandringham estate in Norfolk, as well as horses. So you have dogs and cockerels, and this beautiful owl, which is made of agate with ruby eyes. The chief workmaster was Henrik Wigström. These agate owls were bought by Her Majesty Queen Alexandra from the Fabergé Dover Street branch in 1908 for £20. Fabergé also pioneered flowers in vases. This is a beautiful wild rose by Carl Fabergé from about 1908 in rock crystal, nephrite, enamel and gold, and it seems to conjure up the romanticism of the music. The winter egg was presented by Emperor Nicholas II to Dowager Empress Maria Fedorovna at Easter in 1913. She was the sister of King Edward VII's wife and influenced her in her taste for Fabergé. To me it evokes winter in Russia, and I remember so much when I went to play there in February and I had snow boots, and there's nothing quite like it. Things became much more difficult with the onset of World War I, and although Fabergé continued to produce beautiful works, increasingly his firm contributed to ammunitions. By 1917, it wasn't possible anymore, and the shop in London closed. And in 1918, Fabergé was exiled from Russia, and he died in 1920 in Lausanne in Switzerland, really of a broken heart. Here I am in front of the Russian Orthodox Cathedral in Knightsbridge in London, just round the corner from both the Victoria and Albert Museum and the Royal College of Music. It was built in 1849 to a design from the architect Louis Vulliamy. There's a family connection here in that my daughter, Zelina, is a direct descendant of the Vulliamy family. Like Fabergé, the Vulliamys were Huguenot refugees from France and expert craftsmen. The Vulliamy family were clockmakers to the British royal family for a century, so there are parallels with Fabergé. I remember that when I was in St. Petersburg performing at the Festival of British Music, I had the chance to go into the cathedral next to the Tchaikovsky Conservatoire, and I was really struck by the atmosphere of the singing, the incense, and everyone standing up, and it really made sense to me that the Russian music of the late 19th and early 20th century being influenced by this. In Russia, Easter is the most important occasion, equivalent to Christmas in the West. And for years, there was a tradition of bringing hand-painted Easter eggs to be blessed as gifts. It was Tsar Alexander III who initiated a tradition of making eggs and commissioned Fabergé for 30 years. The first one was in 1885, where the Tsar gave this beautiful egg to his wife, the Empress Maria Fedorovna. The third imperial egg was created by Fabergé in 1886 to 87 and presented to the Empress in 1887. Its yellow gold reeded egg on a pedestal made of jewels has a diamond push button which reveals a surprise timepiece inside made by Vacherin Constantin. There was a sort of Russophilia in Britain in the early part of the 20th century. Composers and artists were influenced by what was happening. And Herbert Howells was born in 1892 and remarkably was a Royal College of Music professor for 60 years, wrote the most beautiful Lucinushka, which is a lament, a Russian lament on a folk tune, in 1917, which of course is the year of the revolution. It's beautifully sad, wistful, evocative. I played this with a Russian pianist in Moscow, and he said, "Oh, it sounds so Russian." Peter, I was telling you about my programme of Russian music, which we're doing at the Victorian Albert Museum, and I was asking you if we had anything at the Royal College of Music which would be relevant, and I was absolutely fascinated that you told me that we have this red leather-bound visitors book and that Tchaikovsky came to the college.
Oh yeah, Tchaikovsky was just one of many composers who came to the college in its early days and continue to come to the college. And it's really lovely with Tchaikovsky because Tchaikovsky had a relationship with Charles Villiers Stanford, who taught composition here, and was invited by Stanford to the UK to get an honorary doctorate from Cambridge University. And it's while he was in London and in Cambridge in that visit that he actually came to the college, heard a concert of including some of his own music, and actually, yeah, so saw the students here.
This is fantastic because we have a letter to Stanford from Tchaikovsky in French, cher collègue, and he's just talking about having gone to Cambridge, and what a treasure. Now, we also have a letter from Glazunov in 1903 in French. Now, that's the year that Fabergé set up the shop in London, so what synchronicity.
Glazunov is another one of the composers who actually, through Stanford's connection, he was given an honorary doctorate from Cambridge, and actually through Parry, who by that point was the director of the college,
yes.
And also the professor at Oxford, Glazunov was given an honorary doctorate from Oxford University as well.
Right.
So it's actually an amazing connection. And of course, Glazunov being in London, he comes to the college because his two contacts in the UK, Parry and Stanford, both work here. And actually, so the students get the opportunity to meet him and to play his music with him, which is great. Yes.
Now, thinking about Herbert Howells, he was a student of Stanford, and we have most of his original manuscripts. Yep. And I have often played the Lucinushka, which is the Russian lament from 1917. And here we have this notebook where he writes out the tune, which is a Russian lament. Yes.
As I said, unfortunately, yeah, the manuscript, a lot of his pre-Second World War manuscripts were lost because his house was bombed.
Yes.
But actually we have this series of notebooks which actually fill in a lot of the gaps for that early period. And yeah, as you say, it's one of 5 different Russian and sort of Ukrainian songs that actually he obviously noted down, thought, I will use that at some point.
Yes.
And then, as you say, he uses the tune in a violin piece.
Yes.
Yeah. And you've also got people like Thomas Beecham and Henry Wood, who were programming Russian music, so Lyadov and people like that, and Rimsky-Korsakov appear in their programs all the time.
Well, in my program, we're having pieces by Lyadov and Rimsky-Korsakov as part of Les Vendredis, which is a fascinating salon which was set up by Belyaev. And so we're playing the mazurka, the saraband, and then the Rimsky-Korsakov last piece of Jour de Fête. My whole life I've had a fascination and a passion for art as well as music. From the age of 15 and going to Paris and seeing those galleries, going to Russia, loving that period of music between about 1880 and 1910 or so. And the art is something that I enjoy so much. When I go on tour, I'm more likely to be found in an art gallery than going to another concert. It was such a rich period for both music and art, from about the 1880s to the First World War in Europe. And what with royal patronage and artists such as Fabergé and all these composers who were coming to prominence, borders opening, it's the most wonderful mélange of art and music.